The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in September 1883, bearing news that would change everything, though Rose Catherine never imagined freedom could feel so much like falling. She stepped off the stage in Tucumcari, New Mexico territory, with nothing but a worn carpetbag and a past that followed her like buzzards circling a dying animal. The dust swirled around her ankles as she surveyed the small frontier town, its wooden buildings bleached by the relentless sun, and wondered if anywhere could ever truly feel like home again. The other passengers gave her a wide berth as they collected their belongings. She had felt their stares during the long journey from Kansas City, the way conversations died when she approached, how mothers pulled their children closer. News traveled faster than any stage could carry it, and her story had outpaced her arrival by at least a week. Rose Catherine Cooper, the woman who had been intimate with a married man back in Abilene, the woman who had nearly destroyed a family, the woman who served 2 years working in a brothel to pay off debts she had accumulated trying to survive after her own family cast her out. None of it mattered that she had been only 18 when it started, desperate and naive. None of it mattered that the man had lied to her, promised he was widowed, groomed her into believing she had found love. The world only saw what it wanted to see, and what it saw in her was sin. She walked toward the general store, her boots clicking against the wooden planks of the boardwalk. The afternoon heat pressed down like a heavy hand, and her dark hair stuck to the back of her neck beneath her bonnet. She needed supplies, a place to stay, and most importantly, she needed work. The small inheritance from her aunt, the only family member who had maintained contact until her death 3 months ago, would not last forever. It was that inheritance that had finally allowed her to leave Kansas City and the life she had been trapped in there. The bell above the door chimed as she entered the general store. The shopkeeper, a round man with spectacles perched on his nose, looked up from his ledger. His expression shifted almost immediately from polite interest to something harder, colder. "Can I help you?" His tone suggested he would rather do anything else. "I need some basic supplies, please," Rose said, keeping her voice steady. "Flour, coffee, beans, some fabric if you have any in a practical color." "We are a respectable establishment," the shopkeeper said, setting down his pen with deliberate slowness. "We serve respectable people." Rose felt the familiar burn of shame mixed with anger rising in her chest. "I am a customer with money to spend. I only want to purchase some goods." "I know who you are, Miss Cooper." He practically spat her name. "Word came ahead about you. We do not need your kind here in Tucumcari. This is a decent town with decent people, and we aim to keep it that way." Before she could respond, another voice cut through the tension. "Henry, that is about the most un-Christian thing I have heard you say in all the years I have known you." Rose turned to see a man standing near the back of the store, partially obscured by shelves of canned goods. He stepped into the light, and she found herself looking at someone who commanded attention without seeming to try. He was tall, with broad shoulders that spoke of hard physical work, sun-weathered skin, and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. But it was his eyes that struck her most, a clear blue-gray that seemed to look past surfaces to something deeper. He appeared to be in his late 20s, perhaps 30 at most, with strong features and hands that looked equally capable of gentleness or strength. "Lucas, this does not concern you," the shopkeeper Henry said with considerably less venom in his voice. "When you are turning away paying customers in my hearing, I reckon it does concern me," Lucas replied. He walked toward the counter with an easy confidence, his spurs jingling softly. "Miss, allow me to help you get what you need. Henry here sometimes forgets that every person deserves basic kindness, regardless of what stories might chase them around." Lucas Kincaid, you do not know what you are involving yourself in, Henry warned. I know enough, Lucas said firmly. He turned to Rose, and when he smiled, it transformed his entire face into something warm and genuine. I am Lucas Kincaid. I run a ranch about 5 miles outside of town. And you are Rose Catherine Cooper, she said softly, waiting for the recognition, the inevitable withdrawal. If he knew her story, and she suspected he did given Henry's comments, he showed no sign of it mattering. It is a pleasure to meet you, Miss Cooper. Now, you mentioned you needed supplies. 20 minutes later, Rose walked out of the general store with her purchases, though the transaction had been tense and uncomfortable. Henry had served them with tight-lipped disapproval, while Lucas had maintained a steady stream of polite conversation, as if nothing unusual was happening at all. Lucas carried the heavier packages, insisting despite her protests. "Where are you staying?" he asked as they stood on the boardwalk. "I have not secured lodging yet," Rose admitted. "I arrived only an hour ago." Lucas frowned slightly. "The boarding house is run by Mrs. Ethel Thompson. She is a good woman, though she can be particular about her tenants. The hotel is more expensive but asks fewer questions." "I was hoping to find work," Rose said. "I can sew, keep books, cook, clean, tend animals. I am a hard worker, Mr. Kincaid. I just need someone willing to give me a chance." He studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "What brings you to Tucumcari specifically?" "My aunt left me a small piece of land here," Rose explained. "Just a few acres on the edge of town. It is not much, barely has a structure standing on it, but it is mine. I thought perhaps I could make a fresh start somewhere nobody knew me." She laughed bitterly. "I was foolish to think news would not travel. People talk," Lucas said simply. "They always will, but talk is just noise if you do not give it power." He shifted the packages in his arms. "I could use some help at my ranch, actually. My housekeeper, Mrs. Garcia, has been after me to hire an assistant. She is not as young as she used to be, and the work is considerable. The position would include room and board, plus wages. It is honest work, and I treat my employees fairly." Rose felt hope flare in her chest, dangerous and bright. "You do not know me, Mr. Kincaid. You do not know what I have done. I know you need work and I need help. The rest is just details." He met her eyes steadily. "Everyone deserves a chance to start over, Miss Cooper. The way I figure it, the past is dead and gone. It is only the future that matters worth a damn." Tears pricked at Rose's eyes, but she blinked them back. "Why would you help me? The shopkeeper made it clear what people think of me." "Henry Whitmore thinks a lot of things, and most of them are not worth the air it takes to speak them," Lucas said. "I make my own judgments about people based on what I see with my own eyes, not on what others tell me I should think. You strike me as someone who has been dealt a rough hand and is trying to make the best of it. That takes courage. Or desperation," Rose said quietly. "Sometimes they look the same from the outside, but the person living it knows the difference." Lucas tilted his head toward the end of the street where horses were tied. "I have a wagon. Let me take you out to the ranch, introduce you to Mrs. Garcia, and show you around. If you decide it is not for you, I will bring you back to town, no questions asked. If you want to stay, the job is yours." Rose considered him carefully. In her experience, when men offered help, they usually expected something in return, something she was no longer willing to give. But there was a directness to Lucas Kincaid, a steadiness that felt genuine. She had learned to read people during her time in Kansas City, learned to spot the ones who saw her as an object versus those who saw her as a person. This rancher seemed to fall into the latter category, rare as that was. "I would appreciate seeing the ranch," she said finally. "Thank you, Mr. Kincaid." "Lucas," he corrected with another one of those warm smiles. If we are going to be working together, might as well skip the formalities. The ride out to the Kincaid Ranch gave Rose her first real look at the New Mexico Territory landscape. It was harsh and beautiful in equal measure, all red earth and vast skies, scrub brush and distant mesas that rose like ancient monuments. The land felt raw here, untamed, as if the world was still deciding what shape it wanted to take. So different from Kansas, with its endless flat prairies and predictable seasons. Lucas kept up a steady conversation during the journey, asking about her trip and telling her about Tucumcari. The town had been established only about a year earlier, growing up around the railroad that was slowly making its way across the territory. Most of the residents were new themselves, trying to carve out lives in this unforgiving land. His ranch, he explained, had been his father's before him, though his father had passed 3 years ago, leaving Lucas as the sole owner. "It is a cattle ranch primarily," Lucas said as they crested a rise and the property came into view. "About 2,000 acres, though only half of that is really usable grazing land. I run about 300 head of cattle, plus horses for working the ranch and some for sale. It is not the biggest operation, but it is mine, and it supports itself and the people who work for it." The ranch house was a sprawling adobe structure that seemed to grow out of the red earth itself. It was practical rather than pretty, built to withstand the extremes of desert weather, with deep-set windows and a wide covered porch that wrapped around 2 sides. Outbuildings dotted the landscape, including barns, corrals, a bunkhouse, and various storage sheds. Rose could see several men working with horses in one of the corrals, and the whole place had an air of purposeful activity. A woman emerged from the house as they pulled up, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps in her 50s, with dark hair streaked with gray and a face that spoke of both kindness and no-nonsense practicality. Her skin was brown and weathered from years under the New Mexico sun, and her eyes were sharp as they took in Rose's appearance. "Mrs. Garcia," Lucas said, hopping down from the wagon and then reaching up to help Rose down. "I have brought someone I would like you to meet. This is Miss Rose Catherine Cooper. Miss Cooper, this is Mrs. Alina Garcia, who keeps this entire operation from falling into chaos." "He exaggerates," Mrs. Garcia said, but there was fondness in her voice, though not by much. She studied Rose with those sharp eyes, and Rose found herself standing a little straighter, meeting the older woman's gaze directly. After a moment, Mrs. Garcia nodded slightly, as if Rose had passed some unspoken test. "You are the one staying in the old Peterson cabin on the edge of town." "My aunt left it to me," Rose confirmed, surprised that Mrs. Garcia knew. "I heard you arrived today. Also heard Henry Whitmore turned you away from his store." Mrs. Garcia's expression darkened. "That man has a talent for being a fool. Come inside, child. You look like you could use something cool to drink and a moment to catch your breath." The interior of the ranch house was surprisingly comfortable, with thick adobe walls that kept the heat at bay and simple but well-made furniture. The main room served as both kitchen and living space, with a large fireplace, a sturdy table that could seat a dozen people, and shelves lined with books and various household items. Everything was scrupulously clean and organized, clearly the domain of someone who took pride in their work. Mrs. Garcia poured 3 glasses of cool water from a ceramic pitcher and settled them all at the table. "Lucas tells me you might be interested in helping around here. He mentioned you could use an assistant," Rose said carefully. "I am a hard worker, Mrs. Garcia. I can sew, cook, clean, tend a garden, help with animals. I keep good accounts and I can read and write. I know my reputation has preceded me, but I promise I will not cause any trouble. I just need a chance to prove I can be relied upon." "Your reputation," Mrs. Garcia repeated. "You mean the stories people tell about you?" Rose felt her cheeks burn but kept her voice steady. "Yes. And are these stories true?" Mrs. Garcia asked directly. Rose appreciated the directness more than she could express. "Some of them are, some are exaggerated. All of them are missing context that most people do not care to hear." "Context is everything," Mrs. Garcia said thoughtfully. She glanced at Lucas, who was watching the exchange quietly. "What do you think, Lucas?" "I think Miss Cooper deserves a chance to start fresh," Lucas said simply. "I think she showed courage coming here despite knowing she would face judgment. And I think we could use the help, especially with you complaining about your back every morning." "I do not complain," Mrs. Garcia protested. "I merely mention it." 15 times yesterday," Lucas said with a teasing smile. Mrs. Garcia waved a hand dismissively but could not quite hide her own smile. She turned back to Rose. "I will tell you plainly, Miss Cooper, I do not care what you did or did not do before you came here. The past is the past, and only God has the right to judge it. What I care about is whether you will work hard, be honest, and treat people with respect. Can you do those things?" "Yes," Rose said, her throat tight with emotion. "I can and I will." "Then I see no reason why this should not work," Mrs. Garcia said decisively. She stood up, all business now. "You can have the small room off the kitchen. It is not large, but it is private and comfortable. Meals are included, of course. We eat well here, Lucas makes sure of that. You will help me with the cooking, cleaning, laundry, mending, and whatever else needs doing around the house. Sometimes that means helping in the garden or with the chickens, or even lending a hand with injured animals. The work is varied and constant." "I can handle it," Rose assured her. "I believe you can," Mrs. Garcia said, and it felt like a benediction. "Let me show you your room, then we can discuss specifics." As Mrs. Garcia led her through the house, Rose caught Lucas's eye. He nodded encouragingly, and she felt that dangerous hope bloom a little brighter in her chest. Perhaps, just perhaps, Tucumcari might become what she had hoped for after all, a place to leave the past behind and build something new. The room was indeed small, barely large enough for the narrow bed, dresser, and small table it contained, but it was clean and private, with a window that looked out toward the distant mesas. It was more than Rose had dared hope for. She set her carpetbag down and ran her fingers over the simple quilt that covered the bed. "I made that quilt the winter Lucas's father died," Mrs. Garcia said from the doorway. "It was a hard winter, cold and lonely. Keeping my hands busy helped." "It is beautiful," Rose said, admiring the intricate pattern of stars in blues and whites. "You will fit in here, I think," Mrs. Garcia said softly. "Lucas is a good man, one of the best I have known. He does not see people for their worst moments. He sees what they could be given the chance." "That is a rare quality," Rose said. "Rarer than it should be." Mrs. Garcia smiled. "Supper is in 2 hours. That gives you time to settle in and rest a bit. The men will eat in the bunkhouse tonight. It is just the 3 of us. Tomorrow we will work out a proper routine, but tonight just relax. You have had a long journey." After Mrs. Garcia left, Rose sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself a moment to simply breathe. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt the tight knot of anxiety in her chest begin to loosen. She was not naive enough to think all her problems were solved. The people of Tucumcari had already shown they would not easily forget her past. But she had work, a place to stay, and 2 people who had chosen to give her a chance. It was more than she had expected when she stepped off that stage this morning. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 spare dresses in the small wardrobe and arranging her brush, mirror, and the small photograph of her parents on the dresser. They had been dead for 5 years now, taken by typhoid fever within days of each other. If they had lived, would things have turned different? Would her father have seen through Martin Hayward's lies and protected her from the man's manipulation? Would her mother have stood by her when the truth came out, instead of her being cast out by her remaining family who saw her only as a shameful burden? These questions had no answers, only the echoing emptiness of what might have been. Rose pushed them aside, as she had learned to do, and focused on the present. She washed her face and hands in the basin of water that had been left for her, tidied her hair, and then sat by the window to watch the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. The sky turned brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple, colors so vivid they seemed impossible, as if the land itself was on fire. It was stunning and terrible and beautiful all at once. A soft knock on her door pulled her from her reverie. "Miss Cooper," Lucas's voice came through the wood. "Supper is ready if you would like to join us." The meal was simple but delicious: beef stew with vegetables and fresh bread, followed by dried apple pie. The conversation flowed easily with Mrs. Garcia sharing stories about the ranch and some of the more amusing mishaps that had occurred over the years. Lucas added his own commentary, and Rose found herself laughing genuinely for the first time in months. It felt strange and wonderful, as if she were trying on a life that did not quite fit yet but might, given time. After supper, Lucas walked Rose out to the porch while Mrs. Garcia cleaned up, despite Rose's offers to help. "Let her have tonight," Mrs. Garcia had insisted. "Tomorrow you work. Tonight you rest." The night air was cool, a relief after the day's heat, and the stars were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. They were brighter here than Rose had ever seen them, scattered across the vast darkness like diamonds on velvet. "It is beautiful," Rose said softly, tilting her head back to take in the full expanse of the sky. "It is one of my favorite things about this place," Lucas said. He leaned against the porch railing, his profile outlined in the soft light spilling from the windows behind them. "No matter how hard the day has been, you can come out here at night and the sky reminds you that you are part of something bigger. It puts things in perspective." They stood in comfortable silence for a few moments before Rose spoke again. "Can I ask you something, Lucas?" "Of course." "Why did you really help me today? You could have walked past me in that store and avoided all the complications that associating with me will bring. People will talk. They already disapprove of me, and now they will question your judgment for hiring me." Lucas was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. 5 years ago, my younger brother Nathan got himself into some trouble. He fell in with a bad crowd, started gambling and drinking too much, eventually stole money from our father to pay off debts. When it all came to light, most of the town wanted to see him run out or worse. They could not see past his mistakes to the scared young man who had made bad choices and wanted to make amends. He paused, his jaw tightening slightly at the memory. My father stood by him. He paid back what Nathan had stolen, worked with him to get clear of the gambling, and gave him a chance to prove he could be better. It was not easy. People talked, said my father was a fool, that Nathan would just disappoint him again. But my father believed in second chances. He believed people could change if given the opportunity and the support. "What happened to Nathan?" Rose asked gently. "He is in Colorado now, working as a ranch foreman. He has a wife and a baby daughter. He turned his life around because someone believed in him when no one else would." Lucas turned to look at Rose directly. "When I saw you standing in that store, facing down Henry's judgment, I saw my brother. I saw someone who needed a chance. How could I walk past that?" Rose felt tears sting her eyes again. "Your father sounds like he was a remarkable man. He was. He taught me that how you treat people when they are at their lowest tells you who you really are as a person. Lucas's voice softened. You do not need to tell me your story, Rose, not until or unless you want to. All I need to know is that you are here now, you want to work hard, and you deserve to be treated with dignity. That is enough for me. Thank you, Rose whispered, her voice thick with emotion. You cannot know what it means to be seen as something other than my mistakes. Everyone is more than their worst moments, Lucas said simply. The trick is finding people who understand that. Rose went to bed that night feeling something she had not felt in years, a sense of possibility. The sheets smelled of sunshine and fresh air, and the mattress, though simple, was comfortable. As she drifted off to sleep, she heard the distant sound of cattle lowing and somewhere far off, a coyote's lonely howl. It should have felt isolating, this vast empty land, but instead it felt like space to breathe. The next morning, Rose woke before dawn to the sound of movement in the kitchen. She dressed quickly in her most practical dress and made her way out to find Mrs. Garcia already starting breakfast. Good, you are up early, Mrs. Garcia said approvingly. That will serve you well here. Ranch life starts before the sun. Rose tied on an apron and got to work, falling easily into the rhythm of breakfast preparation. They worked well together, Mrs. Garcia directing and Rose executing, and by the time the sky began to lighten, they had a substantial meal prepared. Lucas came in with two of his ranch hands, men named Tom Sawyer and Jack Murphy, who eyed Rose with curiosity, but followed Lucas's lead in treating her with polite respect. The days developed a pattern quickly. Rose would rise early and help Mrs. Garcia with breakfast, then they would tackle the day's tasks. There was always something to do: laundry to wash and hang, bread to bake, vegetables to tend in the garden, chickens to feed and eggs to collect, mending to complete, floors to sweep, and 100 other tasks that kept a ranch household running. The work was hard but satisfying, and Rose threw herself into it with determination. Lucas was often out working the ranch, but when he was around the house, he was unfailingly kind. He would bring in fresh water without being asked, help move heavy items, and always had a ready smile and a word of encouragement. Rose found herself watching for him, noticing the way he moved with easy confidence, how he spoke gently to the horses, the way his whole face lit up when he laughed. It was dangerous territory, this awareness of him, but she could not seem to help it. 2 weeks after her arrival, Rose made her first trip back into town with Mrs. Garcia to purchase supplies. She had been dreading it, knowing she would face more judgment and hostility, but she could not hide at the ranch forever. The reaction was exactly what she expected. People stared, whispered behind their hands, and several women crossed the street to avoid passing near her. At the general store, Henry Whitmore served them with barely concealed distaste, though he could not refuse their business entirely, not with Mrs. Garcia standing there like a protective sentinel. "You hold your head high," Mrs. Garcia murmured as they left the store, packages in arms. "These people do not know you. Their opinions are based on gossip and self-righteousness, neither of which reflects on you." But the words still stung. Rose had hoped that perhaps time would soften their attitudes, but clearly that would take longer than 2 weeks. They were loading their purchases into the wagon when a woman approached. She was perhaps in her mid-30s, well-dressed but with a hardness around her eyes that spoke of disappointment and bitterness. "You are Rose Cooper," the woman said. It was not a question. "I am," Rose replied, bracing herself. "I am Charlotte Winters. My husband is the bank manager here." The woman looked Rose up and down with undisguised disdain. "I want you to know that we are watching you. Women like you bring nothing but trouble and sin wherever you go." If you think you can sink your claws into Lucas Kincaid and his money, you are mistaken. We will not allow it." "Charlotte, that is enough," Mrs. Garcia said sharply, moving to stand beside Rose. "You should be ashamed, Alina, enabling her," Charlotte continued. "She was a prostitute. She destroyed a marriage back in Kansas. She has no place among decent people." Rose felt the familiar shame burning through her, but beneath it was a growing anger. She had apologized, paid her debts, tried to move forward, but people like Charlotte Winters would never let her forget, never give her the chance to be anything more than her past. "I am sorry you feel that way, Mrs. Winters," Rose said, keeping her voice as steady as she could manage. "But I am not here to cause trouble. I am simply trying to live my life and work honestly. I hope someday you might see that." "I see exactly what you are," Charlotte spat. "You see what you want to see," Mrs. Garcia interjected, her voice hard as flint. "And what you want to see says far more about you than it does about her. Come, Rose, we have better things to do than waste time on people who have confused judgment with virtue." As they drove away, Rose found she was shaking. "It is never going to stop, is it? No matter what I do, no matter how I try to change, I will always be that woman to them." "Some people, yes," Mrs. Garcia acknowledged. "Some people only feel good about themselves when they can look down on others. They need someone to be beneath them to feel secure. But not everyone is like that, Rose. You have seen that already. Lucas does not care about your past. I do not care. The men who work at the ranch treat you with respect. Those are the people whose opinions matter." "But I cannot avoid the town forever," Rose said. "And if people associate Lucas with me, it could hurt his business, his reputation. Lucas is a grown man perfectly capable of making his own decisions about who he associates with," Mrs. Garcia said firmly. "Do not make the mistake of trying to protect him from consequences he has already considered and accepted. That would dishonor the choice he made to help you." Rose had not thought of it that way. She nodded slowly, trying to absorb the wisdom in Mrs. Garcia's words. Still, the encounter had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. She had known facing the town would be difficult, but the reality of Charlotte Winters's venom had struck deeper than expected. That evening, after supper, Lucas found Rose in the garden. She had taken to spending time there in the evenings, finding peace in the simple work of tending the plants as the day cooled. "Mrs. Garcia told me about what happened in town today," he said, kneeling down to help her pull weeds from around the tomato plants. "I am sorry," Rose said immediately. "I do not want to cause problems for you." "You did not cause any problems," Lucas corrected gently. "Charlotte Winters caused problems by being cruel and self-righteous. Those are her choices, not yours. But people will talk about you for employing me, for defending me. Let them talk." Lucas shrugged. "I have weathered worse than gossip, Rose. My reputation is not so fragile that treating someone with decency will destroy it." They worked in silence for a few minutes before Lucas spoke again. "Can I tell you something my father used to say? He said that character is not about what you do when everyone is watching and approving. It is about what you do when it would be easier to look away, when standing up for what is right might cost you something." "You are a good man, Lucas Kincaid," Rose said softly. "I am just a man trying to do the right thing," he replied. "And the right thing is not letting you face judgment alone when you have done nothing but work hard and try to start over." Rose looked at him in the fading light, at his honest face and kind eyes, and felt something shift in her chest. It was more than gratitude, though she was grateful. It was a recognition, a sense of connection that both thrilled and terrified her. She had thought herself done with such feelings after Martin, after he had revealed himself to be a liar and manipulator, using her youth and naivety against her. She had promised herself she would never be that vulnerable again. But Lucas was nothing like Martin. Where Martin had been smooth and calculated, Lucas was genuine and straightforward. Where Martin had hidden his true self behind charm, Lucas seemed incapable of deception. Still, Rose was afraid to trust these feelings. She had been wrong before, catastrophically wrong, and the consequences had nearly destroyed her. As if sensing her thoughts, Lucas spoke quietly. "I do not know what happened to you before you came here, Rose. I do not need to know unless you want to tell me. But I want you to know that you are safe here. I will not let anyone harm you, and I would never take advantage of your situation. You have my word on that." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Rose nodded, not trusting herself to speak past the lump in her throat. The weeks rolled into months, and autumn settled over the New Mexico territory with cooler nights and crystalline days. Rose's life developed a rhythm that felt increasingly comfortable. She grew close with Mrs. Garcia, the older woman becoming both mentor and friend. The work remained hard but satisfying, and Rose found pride in her contributions to the household. Her interactions with Lucas became the highlights of her days, though she tried not to examine that fact too closely. He would seek her out for conversations, sharing stories about the ranch and asking about her day. He taught her to ride properly, patient and encouraging as she learned to handle the gentle mare he assigned to her. They would sometimes ride out together in the evenings, exploring the dramatic landscape, and Lucas would point out landmarks and tell her the history of the area. She learned that he was 28, had never been married, and had been running the ranch alone since his father's death. He loved this land with a fierce devotion that was evident in everything he did. He was fair with his workers, generous with the few neighbors in the area, and possessed a dry sense of humor that could make her laugh even on difficult days. For her part, Rose slowly began to open up about her past. Not all at once, but in small pieces, shared during their evening rides or quiet moments on the porch. She told him about her parents' deaths, about being alone at 18 with no family willing to take her in. About Martin Hayward, who had seemed like salvation until she discovered he was married, that everything he had told her was a lie crafted to manipulate a desperate girl into his bed. "When his wife found out, she confronted me," Rose said one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. They were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, as had become their habit. "She was so hurt, so angry. I had not known about her, but that did not matter. The damage was done." "He lied to you," Lucas said, his voice tight with anger. "He exploited your vulnerability." "Yes, but I still made the choice to be with him," Rose said. "I have to own that part of it." "You made a choice based on false information," Lucas countered. "That is not the same thing. He bears the responsibility for his deception." "Try telling that to the people of Abilene," Rose said with a bitter laugh. "They ran me out of town. I had no money, no prospects. I ended up in Kansas City working in a brothel because it was the only place that would take me. I worked there for 2 years, saving every penny I could, trying to find a way out." She had never admitted this to anyone, not even Mrs. Garcia, though she suspected the older woman had guessed. Saying it aloud to Lucas felt like standing naked in front of him, exposing the ugliest parts of her past and waiting for his disgust. Instead, he reached over and took her hand gently. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and strong. That must have been incredibly difficult. "It was hell," Rose said bluntly. "Every day I felt like I was dying a little more inside. But then my aunt tracked me down, the only one who had not turned her back on me. She sent me money to pay off the debts I had incurred for room and board. When she died, she left me her property here and enough money to travel. It was my chance to escape, to start over." "I am glad you made it here," Lucas said softly, squeezing her hand. I am glad you kept fighting through all of that." Rose looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. In the golden light of the setting sun, he looked almost ethereal, beautiful in a rugged, honest way that made her heart ache. "You really do not judge me for any of it." "I judge the people who hurt you," Lucas said firmly. "I judge a society that punishes women for men's sins and offers them no path to redemption. But you, I see a survivor, Rose. I see someone with extraordinary courage and strength. That is what I judge you for." Rose felt tears slip down her cheeks, unable to hold them back any longer. Lucas released her hand only to pull her gently into his arms, letting her cry against his chest while he held her with infinite patience. It was the first time someone had held her with pure kindness in longer than she could remember. No expectations, no demands, just comfort freely given. When she finally pulled back, wiping at her eyes, she felt lighter somehow, as if sharing her story and having it received with compassion rather than condemnation had lifted a weight she had been carrying for years. "Thank you," she whispered. "Always," Lucas replied, and the promise in that single word wrapped around her heart like a warm blanket. After that night, things shifted between them subtly. The awareness that had been building turned into something more intentional. Lucas began finding reasons to be near her, helping with tasks that did not really require his assistance, lingering over conversations. Rose caught herself watching for him, her mood lifting whenever he entered a room. Mrs. Garcia noticed, of course. She was far too observant not to. "He cares for you," the older woman said one morning as they prepared bread dough. "In case you have not noticed." Rose felt her cheeks heat. "He is just kind." "He is kind to everyone," Mrs. Garcia agreed, "but he looks at you differently, like you are the sunrise after a long night." "I cannot, Mrs. Garcia," Rose protested. "It would not be fair to him. My reputation would taint him. Lucas does not care about that. He should. He deserves someone without all my baggage, someone the town would accept." Mrs. Garcia fixed her with a stern look. "Lucas deserves someone who makes him happy, who matches his goodness with her own, who understands hard work and resilience." "That sounds like you to me, Rose. Do not decide for him what he should want. Give him the respect of making his own choices." The conversation stayed with Rose over the following days. She found herself watching Lucas with new awareness, noticing things she had tried to ignore. The way his eyes sought her out in a room. How he always seemed to find an excuse to touch her hand or shoulder in passing. The softness in his voice when he said her name. And slowly, carefully, she allowed herself to acknowledge her own feelings. She was falling in love with Lucas Kincaid, had been for weeks now if she was honest with herself. It terrified her, but it also felt right in a way nothing had in years. It was late October when things came to a head. A windstorm had blown through, damaging part of the barn roof, and Lucas was up on a ladder making repairs. Rose brought him water and watched him work, admiring the easy competence with which he handled the tools. "You should not be up there alone," she called. "What if you fell?" "I have been climbing ladders since I was a boy," Lucas called back, but he was smiling. "I think I can manage." "Pride goes before a fall," Rose teased. "Is that concern I hear, Miss Cooper?" "One might think you care about my well-being." "One would be correct," Rose said, surprising herself with the honesty. Lucas paused in his work and looked down at her, his expression suddenly serious. "Rose, can you hand me that box of nails?" She did, and as he reached down to take it, his hand closed over hers. They stayed like that for a moment, connected in the warm afternoon sun. "I need to tell you something," Lucas said quietly. "And I understand if it is too soon, or if you do not feel the same way, but I cannot keep it to myself any longer." Rose's heart began to race. "What is it?" "I have fallen in love with you," Lucas said simply. his blue-gray eyes holding hers with absolute sincerity. "I think I started falling the first day I met you, watching you stand up to Henry in that store. You are brave and strong and kind, and every day I discover something new to admire about you. I know you have been through terrible things, and I know you might not be ready for this, but I needed you to know how I feel." Rose stared up at him, her mind racing. Part of her wanted to run, to protect herself from the possibility of being hurt again. But a larger part, the part that had been slowly healing and growing stronger, wanted to be brave enough to take this risk. "I am afraid," she admitted. "I am afraid of making another mistake, of trusting the wrong person." "I know," Lucas said gently. "I understand that. I am not asking you to rush into anything, Rose. I just wanted you to know that I am here, that when you are ready, I would be honored to court you properly." Court her. The old-fashioned phrase made her smile despite her nerves. "You want to court me, even knowing how the town feels about me?" "Especially knowing that," Lucas said firmly. "You deserve to be courted, Rose. You deserve flowers and walks in the evening and all the sweet things that people do when they care about each other. You deserve to be treated like you matter, because you do. You matter to me more than I can properly express." Rose felt tears welling up again, but these were different from the tears she had cried before. These were tears of hope, of joy, of feeling seen and valued in a way she had never experienced. "I am falling in love with you too," she said softly. "I have been fighting it, trying to convince myself it was just gratitude or circumstance, but it is more than that. You make me feel safe, Lucas. You make me feel like I could be more than my past." "You already are more than your past," Lucas said. He climbed down the ladder quickly and took her hands in his. "You are Rose Catherine Cooper, and you are extraordinary exactly as you are right now." He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, but Rose did not want to. She met him halfway, and their lips touched in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. It was nothing like the kisses she had shared with Martin, which had always felt furtive and tinged with guilt. This kiss felt like coming home. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "So is that a yes to courting?" Lucas asked, his eyes twinkling. "Yes," Rose said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, Lucas Kincaid, you may court me." Mrs. Garcia claimed she was not at all surprised when they told her, though her eyes were suspiciously bright with happy tears. She hugged them both and declared it was about time they stopped dancing around their feelings. The courting was everything Lucas had promised and more. He brought her wildflowers picked from the range, their colors bright against the muted landscape. They took long rides together, and he showed her all his favorite places on the ranch. He taught her about the cattle business and listened with genuine interest when she spoke about her dreams of perhaps starting a small business of her own someday, maybe selling baked goods or doing sewing work. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, building a foundation of friendship alongside the growing romance. Lucas told her about his father, about growing up on the ranch, about his hopes for the future. Rose shared more of her past, the good memories as well as the bad, and found that Lucas listened to all of it with the same patient understanding. He kissed her often, sweet stolen moments on the porch or during their rides, but he never pushed for more. He treated her with a respect that made her love him even more deeply. She realized with some wonder that this was what a real relationship felt like, built on honesty and mutual care rather than manipulation and need. But their happiness existed in a bubble at the ranch. Whenever Rose went into town, she still faced hostility and judgment. Charlotte Winters seemed to have made it her personal mission to make Rose's life difficult, spreading more stories and encouraging others to shun her. Several of the townswomen had approached Lucas, trying to convince him that he was making a mistake, that Rose was after his money, or would bring scandal to his name. Lucas refused to engage with their gossip, which only seemed to make some people angrier. The situation came to a head in late November when Lucas needed to attend a town council meeting. Rose did not want him to face additional criticism because of her, but he insisted it did not matter. The meeting was held in the church, the largest building in town. Lucas arrived to find several council members waiting for him with serious expressions. "Lucas, we need to discuss your relationship with that Cooper woman," Samuel Winters, Charlotte's husband, said without preamble. "I am not sure what there is to discuss, Sam," Lucas said calmly. "My personal life is my own business. It becomes town business when it reflects poorly on all of us." Another council member, Thomas Reed, interjected. "You are a respected rancher, Lucas. People look up to you. What kind of message does it send when you openly associate with a woman of such low character?" "It sends the message that I believe in second chances and treating people with basic human dignity," Lucas replied, his voice hardening. "What message does it send when the good people of Tucumcari drive away someone trying to start over? What does it say about us when we refuse to show mercy?" "There is a difference between mercy and foolishness," Charlotte Winters spoke up from where she sat in one of the pews. Though she was not a council member, she had apparently decided to attend anyway. "That woman is using you, Lucas. She is after your money and your good name." "You do not know the first thing about Rose," Lucas said, struggling to keep his temper in check. "She works harder than anyone I have ever met. She has not asked me for anything. If anything, I pursued her, not the other way around." "Then you are an even bigger fool than we thought," Charlotte snapped. "She has blinded you with her wiles." "Enough." Lucas's voice cracked like a whip. "I will not sit here and listen to you slander a woman you have never even tried to know. Rose has been nothing but kind and hardworking since she arrived here. The only people who have shown poor character are those who have judged her without mercy or understanding." "We know what she did," Samuel Winters said. "She destroyed a marriage. She was lied to and manipulated by a married man when she was barely more than a child," Lucas corrected sharply. "That man destroyed his own marriage through his choices. Rose was a victim, but because she is a woman, she is the only one who paid the price. Where is your righteous anger for Martin Hayward? Where is your judgment for him?" The room fell silent. Several people shifted uncomfortably. "I thought as much," Lucas said bitterly. "You want to punish Rose because it is easier than acknowledging the inequity of how we treat women in situations like hers. Well, I will not be part of it. Rose is a good person who deserves a chance at happiness, and if you cannot see that, then the failing is yours, not hers." He stood to leave, but Reverend Thomas, the town minister who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "Lucas, wait, please sit." Lucas hesitated, then lowered himself back into his chair. "I hear what you are saying," Reverend Thomas said carefully, "and you are not entirely wrong. We should be a community that offers forgiveness and second chances. That is the core of our faith." He paused, looking around at the gathered townspeople. "But you must also understand the concerns. People worry about the influence someone with Miss Cooper's past might have, especially on young women." "What influence?" Lucas asked. "The influence of hard work, of perseverance in the face of adversity, of courage to start over despite overwhelming odds." "Those seem like excellent influences to me, Reverend." "You know what I mean," the Reverend said gently. "I do, and I am saying it is hypocritical," Lucas replied. "Half the men in this town have pasts they would not want examined too closely. Jack Murphy, who works for me, spent time in jail for horse theft before I hired him. Thomas Reed, sitting right here, was run out of Dodge City for gambling debts. Samuel, did not your father build his business selling whiskey to soldiers, skirting around regulations? We all have things in our past we are not proud of, but somehow Miss Cooper is the only one who cannot escape hers. Those are different, Samuel protested. How? Explain to me exactly how they are different, Lucas challenged. No one seemed to have a good answer. Finally, Reverend Thomas spoke again. Perhaps Lucas has a point. Perhaps we have been quicker to judge than to show mercy. The scriptures tell us that he who is without sin should cast the first stone. None of us can claim that distinction. Are you saying we should just accept her? Charlotte asked, sounding outraged. I am saying we should give her the same grace we would want for ourselves or our loved ones, the Reverend said. If Lucas vouches for her character, and from what I have heard, Elena Garcia does as well, perhaps we should trust their judgment. They have actually spent time with Miss Cooper. We have only heard stories. The meeting ended without a clear resolution, but Lucas felt he had at least planted seeds of doubt in the certainty of Rose's detractors. He rode home frustrated but determined. This was not over, but he would not back down. Rose deserved better than the treatment she had received. When he arrived back at the ranch, he found Rose waiting on the porch despite the cold evening air. She stood as he approached, her expression anxious. How bad was it? She asked. About what I expected, Lucas said, dismounting and tying his horse. He climbed the porch steps and pulled her into his arms. They do not understand, but they will, or they will not, and it will not matter because I am not changing my mind about you, about us. Lucas, maybe we should stop this, Rose said quietly, though her arms wrapped around him contradicted her words. I cannot stand being the reason people think poorly of you. You are not the reason. Their small-mindedness is the reason. He pulled back to look at her face in the lamplight. Rose, I love you. I'm not going to stop loving you because some people cannot see past their own judgment. I need you to understand that I am in this, truly in this, for as long as you will have me. I love you too, Rose said, her voice breaking. I just wish it could be easier. Nothing worth having is easy, Lucas said, echoing words his father had often spoken. We will get through this together. Winter settled over New Mexico with surprising ferocity that year. Snow fell in heavy blankets, unusual for the territory, and temperatures dropped to bitter lows. The ranch work became more difficult, focused on keeping the cattle alive and ensuring the stock did not freeze. Rose proved invaluable during this time, working alongside Mrs. Garcia to keep the household running smoothly. They prepared massive amounts of food for the ranch hands who could not risk leaving the ranch during the worst of the weather. Rose learned to make hearty stews that stretched ingredients, baked bread daily, and even figured out how to keep the chickens laying despite the cold. Lucas was often exhausted from the constant demands of winter ranching, but he still made time for Rose. They would sit together by the fire in the evenings after everyone else had gone to bed, talking quietly or sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence. Rose would mend clothes while Lucas read aloud from books of poetry or adventure stories. It was domestic and peaceful, a glimpse of the life they might build together. In early December, a particularly fierce blizzard struck. The snow fell so heavily that visibility dropped to mere feet, and the wind howled like something alive. Lucas and his men worked around the clock to secure the buildings and keep the stock alive. Rose found herself in the barn at one point, helping to warm a newborn calf that had been born in the storm. She wrapped the tiny creature in blankets and held it close, trying to transfer her body heat while its mother lowed anxiously nearby. Lucas came to check on her, looking like a snowman with ice crusting his coat and hat. "How is the calf?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "Cold, but I think he will make it," Rose said. The little animal was shivering but alert, which she took as a good sign. Lucas reached out and touched the calf gently, then looked at Rose with such tenderness it made her breath catch. "You are amazing, you know that?" "I am just trying to keep a baby cow alive," Rose protested. "You are doing so much more than that," Lucas said. "You have brought life back to this ranch, Rose. Before you came, it was just work and routine. Now it feels like a home again." "You did that," Rose said softly. "You made me feel like I could have a home again when I thought that was impossible." They stayed like that, huddled in the barn with a newborn calf between them and a blizzard raging outside, and Rose thought it might be one of the most perfect moments of her life. The calf survived, and they named him December. It became something of a joke around the ranch, the little bull calf that Rose had saved during the storm. Lucas started referring to Rose as the calf whisperer, which made her laugh as Christmas approached. Rose found herself happier than she could remember being in years. She helped Mrs. Garcia prepare for the holiday, making special foods and decorating the ranch house with evergreen branches Lucas and the men brought in from the higher elevations. It would be a simple celebration, but it would be filled with warmth and care. On Christmas Eve, Lucas asked Rose to take a walk with him. They bundled up against the cold and walked out to a spot where the land rose slightly, offering a view of the ranch buildings below and the vast starlit sky above. The moon was nearly full, turning the snow-covered landscape into something magical, all silver and shadow. "I want to give you something," Lucas said, pulling a small wrapped package from his coat. Rose opened it carefully and gasped. Inside was a delicate silver locket, engraved with a pattern of roses. "Lucas, it is beautiful," she breathed. "Open it," he urged. Inside was a tiny photograph of the two of them together. Rose did not even know when it had been taken, but there they were, looking at each other and smiling. "A traveling photographer came through in November when you went to check on your aunt's property," Lucas explained. "I asked Mrs. Garcia to distract you so I could have this made." Rose felt tears forming. "I do not know what to say." "Say you will marry me," Lucas said simply. Rose's head snapped up, her eyes wide. "What?" Lucas took both her hands in his. "I love you, Rose Catherine Cooper. I love your strength and your kindness and your courage. I love the way you laugh and the way you bite your lip when you are concentrating. I love who I am when I am with you. I know it has not been very long, but when something is right, you know it. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. Will you marry me?" Rose stared at him, her heart pounding. Marriage, the thing she had thought she would never have, never deserve. And here was this incredible man offering it to her, offering her his name and his life and his love. "The town will be furious," she said, but it came out more like a question than a protest. "Let them be furious," Lucas said. "I am not asking the town to marry me, I am asking you." "You could do so much better than me," Rose tried again. "There is no better than you," Lucas said firmly. "Rose, you are it for me. You are the person I want to wake up next to every morning and fall asleep beside every night. You are who I want to build a life with, raise children with if we are blessed that way, grow old with. Please say yes." Rose looked at this man who had given her so much, had seen past her mistakes to her potential, had loved her when she thought herself unlovable. How could she say anything but yes? "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Lucas, I will marry you." He let out a whoop of joy and swept her up, spinning her around despite the snow and the cold. When he set her down, he kissed her with a passion that made her dizzy. This was real. This was happening. She was going to marry Lucas Kincaid. Mrs. Garcia cried happy tears when they told her, hugging them both and declaring it the best Christmas present she could have received. The ranch hands congratulated Lucas enthusiastically, having apparently seen this coming from miles away. Lucas wanted to marry quickly, not wanting to wait any longer than necessary. They decided on a date in late January, giving them just enough time to make basic preparations. Lucas would go into town after the new year to file the necessary paperwork and inform the Reverend. That trip to town was as difficult as expected. When Lucas announced his intention to marry Rose, the reaction was swift and harsh. "You cannot be serious," Samuel Winters said, his face reddening. "I am completely serious," Lucas replied calmly. They were in the Reverend's office, and several busybodies had apparently gotten wind of Lucas's visit and shown up uninvited. "It is a scandal," Charlotte Winters declared. "You are throwing away your good name for a woman who is—" "Careful," Lucas interrupted, his voice low and dangerous. "Choose your next words very carefully, Mrs. Winters." Charlotte looked momentarily taken aback but rallied quickly. "A woman of questionable morals. A woman who has done nothing but work hard and live honestly since arriving in Tucumcari," Lucas corrected. "A woman who has shown more grace and strength than most people I know. A woman I love and intend to marry whether you approve or not." "Then you are a fool," Samuel said flatly. "If loving Rose makes me a fool, then I am happy to be one," Lucas replied. Reverend Thomas had been listening quietly. Now he spoke. "Lucas, are you certain about this? Not because of any stories about Miss Cooper, but simply because it has not been very long since she arrived. Marriage is a serious commitment." "I am more certain of this than I have been of anything in my life, Reverend," Lucas said honestly. "I know what I am doing, and I know who Rose is. She is a good person, and she makes me happy. That is all that should matter." The Reverend studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. If you are certain, I will perform the ceremony. Every person deserves the chance to start fresh, and marriage is a holy union that should be celebrated, not condemned." "You cannot be serious, Reverend," Charlotte protested. "I am quite serious, Mrs. Winters," Reverend Thomas said firmly. "The Bible teaches us to love one another, to forgive, to show mercy. I will not turn away a couple who genuinely love each other simply because one of them has a past some find objectionable. We all have pasts. We all need grace." Lucas felt a rush of gratitude toward the minister. "Thank you, Reverend. This means more than you know." The news of the upcoming wedding spread through Tucumcari like wildfire. Reactions were predictably mixed. Some people were outraged, claiming Lucas had lost his mind. Others were more measured, suggesting that perhaps Rose had earned a second chance through her months of good behavior. A few, very few, were openly supportive. Rose tried not to let the gossip bother her, but it was difficult. She had hoped that by now, months after her arrival, people might have softened toward her. Instead, the news of her engagement seemed to have hardened the opposition. "Maybe we should wait longer," she suggested to Lucas a week before the planned wedding. "Give people time to adjust to the idea." "We could wait 10 years and some people still would not adjust," Lucas said practically. "Rose, if we let other people's opinions dictate our lives, we will never be happy. I want to marry you. Do you want to marry me? More than anything," Rose admitted. "Then that is what matters. Everything else is just noise." The wedding was planned for a Saturday afternoon in late January. Mrs. Garcia helped Rose sew a simple but lovely dress in ivory wool, practical for the cold weather but still special. Lucas arranged for a small reception at the ranch afterward, just their close friends and the ranch workers. The morning of the wedding, Rose woke with butterflies in her stomach. She was getting married, to Lucas Kincaid. The reality of it felt almost impossible. Mrs. Garcia helped her dress, arranging her hair in an elegant style and pinning a small cluster of winter greenery and dried flowers to the side. The locket Lucas had given her for Christmas hung around her neck. "You look beautiful," Mrs. Garcia said, tears in her eyes. "Lucas is a lucky man." "I am the lucky one," Rose said softly. I still cannot believe this is happening. Believe it, child. You deserve every bit of happiness coming your way." They rode to town in the wagon, accompanied by several of the ranch hands who had become Rose's friends over the months. She appreciated their solid, supportive presence. As they approached the church, Rose could see a small crowd gathered outside. Her heart sank. Were they here to protest? But as they drew closer, she realized not all the faces were hostile. Some people looked curious, others neutral. A few even appeared friendly. It was not the united opposition she had feared. Lucas was waiting inside the church, looking handsome in a dark suit Rose had never seen him wear before. When his eyes met hers across the small sanctuary, he smiled with such pure joy that all her nervousness melted away. This was right. They were right. The ceremony itself was simple and beautiful. Reverend Thomas spoke about love and forgiveness, about new beginnings and the grace of second chances. When it came time for the vows, Lucas's voice was strong and clear. "I, Lucas Kincaid, take you, Rose Catherine Cooper, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you, in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health, for as long as we both shall live. I promise to see you always for who you are, not who you were, and to build a future with you based on trust and respect." Rose could barely see him through her tears as she spoke her own vows. "I, Rose Catherine Cooper, take you, Lucas Kincaid, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you with all my heart, to stand beside you through whatever life brings, and to never take for granted the gift of your love and faith in me. You have shown me what it means to be truly loved, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to give you even a fraction of what you have given me." When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas kissed her with such tenderness that Rose felt her heart might burst. They were married. She was Mrs. Lucas Kincaid. The reception at the ranch was warm and joyful. Mrs. Garcia had outdone herself with the food, and someone had produced a fiddle, filling the house with music. The ranch hands and a few neighbors who had come in support of Lucas toasted the couple and shared stories and laughter. As the evening wore on, Lucas pulled Rose outside for a moment of quiet. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose and lavender. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Kincaid?" he asked, pulling her close. "Like the luckiest woman alive," Rose said honestly. "I keep thinking I am going to wake up and find this was all a dream." "Not a dream," Lucas assured her, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "This is real, we are real, and this is just the beginning." That night, their first as husband and wife, was everything Rose had never dared to hope for. Lucas was gentle and patient, mindful of her past experiences and determined that this would be different, would be about mutual love and trust rather than manipulation or transaction. He worshipped her body with his hands and mouth, telling her over and over how much he loved her, how beautiful she was, how honored he felt to be her husband. For Rose, intimacy had always been something tainted, something that came with shame and regret. But with Lucas, it was transformed into something beautiful, an expression of the love and commitment they had pledged to each other. When they finally came together, moving as one in the darkness of their bedroom, Rose felt tears streaming down her face, not from pain or sorrow but from the overwhelming rightness of it all. "I love you," she whispered afterward, curled against his chest as his hand traced lazy patterns on her back. "I love you more than words can express," Lucas murmured back, pressing a kiss to her hair. "You are my life now, Rose, my future, my everything." The first months of marriage were an adjustment, but a beautiful one. Rose moved her few belongings into Lucas's room, their room now, and slowly began to make the space reflect both of them. She hung curtains she had sewn, placed photographs on the dresser, added small touches that made it feel like home. Her relationship with Mrs. Garcia evolved as well. The older woman began teaching Rose more about ranch management, preparing her to eventually take over as the lady of the house. It was never explicitly stated, but Rose understood that Mrs. Garcia was grooming her for the role she would someday occupy fully. The town's reaction to the marriage was slower to soften than Rose had hoped. Charlotte Winters remained vocally opposed, continuing to spread gossip and trying to organize a social boycott of Rose. Some people went along with her, refusing to acknowledge Rose on the street or in shops. But others began to thaw, especially after Reverend Thomas gave a pointed sermon about judgment and grace that made several parishioners squirm uncomfortably in their pews. Rose focused on living her life as honestly and kindly as possible, hoping that actions would eventually speak louder than old stories. She continued to work hard at the ranch, building friendships with the workers and their families. She made a point of being generous when she could, helping a neighboring family when their mother took ill, contributing baked goods to the church fundraiser even when she knew they might be rejected. Slowly, incrementally, attitudes began to shift. It started small, a nod from a woman who had previously ignored her, a genuine smile from the man who ran the feed store. The school teacher, a young woman named Miss Sarah Crawford, struck up a conversation with Rose one day and confessed that she admired Rose's courage in the face of such hostility. "I think what you are doing is brave," Sarah said. "Not letting the past define you, building a new life. That takes real strength." "Thank you," Rose said, touched by the unexpected support. "It means more than you know to hear that." Sarah became Rose's first real friend in Tucumcari aside from Mrs. Garcia. They would occasionally have tea together, and Sarah would share stories about her students and the challenges of teaching. Rose appreciated having a friendship that was not based on pity or proximity, but on genuine connection. By the time spring arrived, painting the desert in unexpected colors as wildflowers bloomed in defiant beauty, Rose felt like she was finally finding her place. The town would never fully embrace her, she accepted that, but she no longer needed their approval to feel worthy. She had Lucas's love, good work that filled her days, and a home that felt truly hers. In April, Rose realized she had missed her monthly courses. At first, she attributed it to stress or simply her body being irregular, but when it happened a second month, she began to wonder. She confided in Mrs. Garcia, who examined her with experienced eyes and gentle hands. "I believe you are carrying a child," Mrs. Garcia said with a warm smile. "Congratulations, Rose." Rose felt a complicated rush of emotions. Joy, yes, but also fear. What if she was not a good mother? What if her past somehow tainted her ability to raise a child? What if the town's judgment extended to her baby? Mrs. Garcia seemed to sense her thoughts. "You will be a wonderful mother," she said firmly. "And Lucas will be an excellent father. This child will be loved and cared for. That is what matters." That evening, Rose told Lucas. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset as had become their habit. She had been trying to find the right words all day, but in the end, she just said it simply. "I am pregnant." Lucas went completely still for a moment, then turned to her with wonder dawning on his face. "Truly, Mrs. Garcia thinks so. I have missed 2 months now, and I have been feeling sick in the mornings." Lucas let out a whoop that probably scared the horses and pulled Rose into his arms, holding her close. "We are going to have a baby. Rose, we are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Rose asked, needing to hear it. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Lucas said, pulling back to look at her face. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. This is everything I could have hoped for and more. We are going to have a family, Rose." Over the following months, Rose's pregnancy progressed normally, though she found the constant exhaustion and occasional sickness challenging. Lucas became even more attentive if that was possible, constantly worrying about her health and trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work. Mrs. Garcia and Rose finally had to sit him down and explain that pregnancy was not an illness, and Rose needed to stay active. The town's reaction to Rose's pregnancy was another test. Some people softened further, seeing her as more human and less threatening now that she was going to be a mother. Others seemed to view it as confirmation that she had trapped Lucas through feminine wiles. Rose tried to ignore the negative reactions and focus on the positive, on preparing for the baby's arrival. Sarah threw a small tea party for Rose, inviting a few of the kinder women in town. It was not the grand affair that someone like Charlotte Winters might have received, but it was genuine and warm. Rose received gifts of knitted booties and blankets, practical items that she knew represented not just material goods, but a step toward acceptance. Lucas transformed one of the smaller bedrooms into a nursery, building a beautiful cradle from oak wood and painting the room a cheerful yellow. Rose sewed curtains and blankets, preparing a space for the child they would soon welcome. On a cold night in late November, Rose went into labor. It was long and difficult, as first births often are, and there were moments when Rose feared she might not survive it. Lucas stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and offering encouragement even as he looked terrified. Mrs. Garcia and the doctor Lucas had brought from the nearest large town worked calmly and efficiently. After what felt like an eternity, Rose heard the most beautiful sound in the world, a baby's cry. "It is a boy," Mrs. Garcia announced, tears streaming down her face. "A healthy baby boy." Lucas was crying too, and Rose found herself weeping from exhaustion and relief and overwhelming love as Mrs. Garcia placed the tiny, squalling infant in her arms. He was perfect, absolutely perfect, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists that waved indignantly. "Hello, little one," Rose whispered. "I am your mama, and I promise I will love you with everything I have." Lucas knelt beside the bed, one arm around Rose and one hand gently touching his son's head. "He is incredible. You are incredible. Thank you, Rose. Thank you for him, for everything." They named him Matthew Henry Kincaid. Matthew for Rose's father and Henry, ironically, because Lucas said if they named the boy after the grumpy shopkeeper, maybe the man would finally soften toward Rose. It worked better than they expected. When Henry Whitmore learned the child bore his name, he was so touched that he sent over a generous gift, and even managed a stiff apology to Rose for his behavior when she first arrived. The first months with Matthew were exhausting but joyful. Rose had never imagined she could love anything as much as she loved her son. Watching Lucas with the baby was almost as wonderful, seeing this strong rancher reduced to cooing nonsense and making silly faces to elicit one of Matthew's rare infant smiles. The town's attitude toward Rose continued to improve after Matthew's birth. It was as if having a child made her more acceptable in their eyes, proof that she was now a respectable married woman rather than the scandalous figure from the past. Rose found it somewhat ironic that her worth was measured by her roles as wife and mother rather than simply as a person. But she was pragmatic enough to accept the increased acceptance for what it was, progress, even if imperfect. Charlotte Winters remained the holdout, still spreading gossip and trying to maintain her campaign against Rose. But even she lost influence as more and more townspeople decided that holding on to old grudges was exhausting and ultimately pointless. The world was moving forward, and Rose Kincaid, as she was now known, was simply part of the community whether Charlotte liked it or not. When Matthew was 6 months old, Rose and Lucas took him into town for the first time. Rose was nervous, unsure how people would react to seeing her with the baby. But the reaction was overwhelmingly positive. Women stopped to admire Matthew and offer parenting advice. Men congratulated Lucas on his fine son. Even people who had previously ignored Rose found themselves drawn by the baby's presence and, through him, began to see Rose in a new light. "You were right," Rose told Lucas later that evening as they put Matthew to bed in his cradle. "Time and just living our lives honestly, it is making a difference. People need time to change their stories," Lucas said wisely. "They had built a narrative about you in their minds, and it takes effort to rebuild that into something different. But you have given them no choice but to see you as you really are, and what they see is a good person and a wonderful mother." Matthew grew from an infant to a toddler, bright-eyed and curious about everything. He adored his father, following Lucas around the ranch as soon as he could walk, and he was equally attached to his mother, running to Rose for comfort when he was hurt or scared. Mrs. Garcia spoiled him shamelessly, teaching him Spanish words and slipping him treats when she thought his parents were not looking. When Matthew was 2, Rose discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy felt easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect or perhaps because she was simply more confident in general. Lucas was once again overjoyed, and Matthew seemed to sense something was changing, becoming both more clingy and more independent by turns. Their daughter, Emma Grace Kincaid, was born on a beautiful spring morning in March 1887. The birth was quicker than Matthew's had been, and Emma came into the world screaming her displeasure with impressive volume. She had her mother's dark hair and her father's blue-gray eyes, and from the moment Rose held her, she was completely besotted. Matthew was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to hold her and help with everything. Lucas had to constantly remind him to be gentle, but his enthusiasm was endearing. They were a family now, truly a family, and Rose marveled at how far she had come from that frightened woman stepping off the stage 4 years ago. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm over the next few years. The ranch prospered under Lucas's careful management, and Rose became increasingly involved in the business side of things, keeping books and managing accounts alongside her household duties. She also began sewing for other families, both as a way to contribute financially and because she enjoyed the work. Her reputation for excellent needlework spread, and soon she had more requests than she could easily fulfill. Mrs. Garcia, growing older now, began to step back from some of her duties, content to help with the children and lighter tasks, while Rose gradually took over as the lady of the house. It was a transition done with love and mutual respect, and the older woman remained an essential part of their family. Matthew started school when he turned 6, attending the small schoolhouse in town. Sarah Crawford, now married to the local banker's son and going by Mrs. Sarah Patterson, was still teaching, and she welcomed Matthew warmly. Rose felt a pang watching her son head off to school that first day, knowing he would face questions about his mother's past. But Lucas had prepared him carefully, explaining in age-appropriate terms that some people might say unkind things, but that the truth was his mama was brave and strong and good. Matthew came home that first day full of excitement about all he had learned, with no mention of any problems. Over time, Rose came to understand that her children's generation did not care much about her past. To them, she was just Matthew and Emma's mother, Lucas Kincaid's wife, a woman who made the best apple pie in the county and always had a kind word. The stories that had seemed so defining when she first arrived had faded into background noise, still there, but no longer the most important thing about her. One evening in the summer of 1890, when Matthew was 7 and Emma was 3, Rose and Lucas sat on their porch watching the children play in the yard. Matthew was teaching Emma to catch grasshoppers, and her delighted giggles carried on the warm breeze. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Rose asked quietly. "If you had not walked into that general store on the day I arrived, if you had not decided to help me." Lucas was quiet for a moment, considering. "Sometimes. But then I think about how glad I am that I did make that choice. These years with you, building this life together, raising our children, it has been the greatest privilege of my life." "I never thought I would have this," Rose admitted, gesturing to encompass the ranch, the children, their life together. "A home, a family, respect. After everything that happened in Kansas, I thought I was ruined beyond redemption." "You were never ruined," Lucas said firmly. "You were young and hurt and manipulated, but none of that ruined you. It shaped you, yes, made you who you are, but it did not diminish your worth." Rose leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steadiness that had been her anchor through so much. "You saved me." "We saved each other," Lucas corrected. "I was doing fine before you arrived, but I was not truly living. I was going through the motions, running the ranch because it was what I knew how to do. You brought joy back into my life, gave me purpose beyond just surviving day to day. You gave me love and family and laughter. If anything, Rose, you saved me." They sat in companionable silence, watching their children and the sunset and the vast New Mexico sky, and Rose felt profound gratitude wash over her. Her life had been hard, marked by mistakes and suffering, but it had led her here to this moment, this family, this love. She would not change any of it, because changing it would mean losing what she had found. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the milestones of their children's lives. Matthew grew into a thoughtful boy who loved books as much as ranching, often found reading under a tree when he should have been doing chores. Emma was more outgoing, making friends easily and charming everyone she met with her bright smile and ready laugh. In 1892, Rose gave birth to a third child, another son they named Nathan after Lucas's brother, who had become a regular visitor to the ranch. Little Nathan was a happy baby who rarely cried and seemed content to observe the world with wide, curious eyes. Charlotte Winters passed away in the spring of 1893, and Rose was surprised to find she felt more sadness than relief. The woman had made her life difficult, yes, but Rose understood now that Charlotte's cruelty had come from her own pain and insecurity. At the funeral, Samuel Winters approached Rose hesitantly. "I want to apologize," he said, looking uncomfortable. "My wife, she was not always kind to you." "Neither was I. We were wrong." "Thank you for saying that," Rose replied graciously. "I hold no grudge, Mr. Winters. We all do the best we can with what we understand at the time." The apology felt like the closing of a chapter. Rose was no longer the scandalous woman from Kansas City, but simply Mrs. Rose Kincaid, a respected member of the community, a good mother, a capable ranch wife. She served on the church committee, helped organize town socials, and was frequently called upon to help families in need with her sewing skills or cooking or simply a sympathetic ear. One day in the fall of 1894, a young woman stepped off the stage in Tucumcari looking lost and frightened. Rose, in town for supplies, noticed her immediately. The girl could not have been more than 19, with hollow eyes and shabby clothes, and the way people gave her a wide berth suggested her story had preceded her arrival, just as Rose's once had. Rose approached the girl directly, remembering what it felt like to stand alone in a hostile town. "Hello, "I am Rose Kincaid. You look like you could use some help." The girl's eyes filled with tears. "They said no one here would help me." "They were wrong," Rose said firmly, holding out her hand. "Come on. Let me buy you a meal and we can talk about what you need." Over lunch at the small restaurant, Rose learned the girl's name was Margaret, and her story was painfully familiar. Seduced by a lying man, left pregnant and alone, cast out by her family. She had come to New Mexico territory hoping to find work and start over, but news of her pregnancy had traveled ahead. "I understand more than you might think," Rose said quietly, and then she told her own story. Not to bond over shared trauma, but to show Margaret that survival was possible, that redemption and new beginnings were real. By the end of the meal, Rose had offered Margaret a job helping at the ranch. There was always work to be done, and Mrs. Garcia, now quite elderly, could use additional assistance. Margaret accepted with gratitude that made Rose's heart ache with recognition. Lucas supported the decision without question when Rose brought Margaret home. "We were helped when we needed it," he said simply. "Now we help others." Margaret proved to be a hard worker and a sweet person. Rose found unexpected healing in helping the younger woman, as if by offering Margaret the compassion and support she herself had needed. She was completing some circle that had begun the day she arrived in Tucumcari. When Margaret's baby was born, a beautiful girl she named Hope, the ranch celebrated. Rose held the tiny infant and felt tears streaming down her face, remembering Matthew's birth and how terrified she had been that her past would somehow taint her ability to be a good mother. "You are going to be a wonderful mother," Rose told Margaret. "Do not let anyone tell you otherwise." "Like you?" Margaret asked softly. "I am trying," Rose said honestly. "Every day I am trying to be better, to give my children a good life, to be worthy of the second chance I was given." "You are worthy," Margaret said with conviction. "You helped me when no one else would. That is who you are, Mrs. Kincaid, not whoever you might have been before." The wisdom in the young woman's words struck Rose deeply. She realized she had been so focused on trying to atone for her past that she had not fully embraced her present. She was not the frightened girl who had been manipulated by Martin Hayward. She was not even the woman who had stepped off the stage in 1883, desperate and defensive. She was Rose Kincaid, wife and mother, friend and helper, a woman who had survived and thrived and built a good life through determination and the grace of people who loved her. That night, she told Lucas what she had realized. They were in their bedroom, preparing for sleep, a routine so familiar and comfortable it felt like coming home to herself. "I think I finally understand," Rose said, sitting at her dressing table while Lucas turned down the lamp. "For years, I have been trying to prove I am not my past, but maybe what I needed to do was simply accept that my past is part of me, not all of me. It shaped me, but it does not define me." Lucas came to stand behind her, his hands resting gently on her shoulders. "You have always been more than your past, Rose. The rest of us could see it. I am glad you finally can too." Rose looked at their reflection in the mirror, this couple they had become, partners in every sense. Lucas's hair was starting to show a bit of silver at the temples now, and Rose could see the fine lines beginning to form around her own eyes. They were aging together, building a life that would outlast them both through their children and the legacy of kindness they tried to embody. "I love you," Rose said, meeting his eyes in the mirror. "Thank you for seeing me when I could not see myself." "Always," Lucas promised, the same word he had used so many years ago, and it still meant everything. The turn of the century brought changes to Tucumcari and the world beyond. The railroad expanded, bringing more people and commerce. The town grew from a rough frontier settlement into a more established community. Indoor plumbing became available, and some houses even got electricity. The Kincaid Ranch modernized too, though it retained its fundamental character as a working cattle operation. Matthew, now a young man of 18, showed a talent for the business side of ranching and was beginning to take on more responsibility. Emma, at 15, was beautiful and bright, torn between her love of the ranch and her curiosity about the wider world. Nathan, at 10, was still finding his way but showed signs of inheriting his father's steady, kind nature. Margaret had married one of the ranch hands, a good man named Robert who loved both her and Hope unconditionally. They had built a small house on the ranch property and were raising Hope alongside their own son. Margaret often told Rose that she wanted to be like her when she grew up, to turn pain into purpose the way Rose had. Mrs. Garcia passed away peacefully in her sleep in the spring of 1901, at the age of 76. Rose and Lucas mourned deeply, for she had been the backbone of their family for so many years. They buried her in the small cemetery on the ranch, under a tree she had loved, and Rose made sure fresh flowers adorned the grave every week. "She believed in me when almost no one else did," Rose told Lucas at the funeral. "She saw past all the stories and judgments to who I actually was. She loved you," Lucas said simply, "and you honored that love by becoming everything she saw in you." Life continued as it always does. Rose became a grandmother when Matthew married a kind young woman named Alice, and they had a son, followed by twin daughters. Emma eventually went east to attend a women's college, unprecedented for their family, but Lucas insisted that their daughter should have every opportunity to pursue her dreams. She returned home summers, filling the ranch with stories of her studies and adventures. Nathan decided ranching was his calling and apprenticed himself to his father, learning the business from the ground up. He had Lucas's patience and Rose's determination, and they both knew the ranch would be in good hands when the time came to pass it on. Rose marked the 20th anniversary of her arrival in Tucumcari in the autumn of 1903. She was 41 years old now, with grown children and grandchildren, a life so full and rich it sometimes took her breath away. Lucas suggested they return to the spot where he had proposed, and they rode out together one evening, just the two of them, as the sun began to set. The view was unchanged, vast and beautiful and eternal. But they had changed, marked by time and experience, shaped by the life they had built together. "You have any regrets?" Lucas asked, echoing a question she had asked him so many years ago. Rose considered carefully. "I regret the pain my choices caused others, especially Martin's wife. I regret the years lost to fear and shame, but I do not regret the journey that brought me here to this life. Everything I went through made me who I am, and I like who I am now." "I like who you are too," Lucas said with a smile. "I more than like you, actually. After 20 years, I love you more than I did the day we married, and I loved you quite a lot even then." 20 years, Rose marveled. "It seems impossible. Some days I still feel like that frightened woman who walked into Henry's store, certain the world would never forgive her." "The world does not matter," Lucas said, pulling her close. "What matters is how we treat each other, the family we have built, the good we have tried to do. You have touched so many lives, Rose. Margaret and Hope, all the women you have quietly helped over the years, our children who have learned compassion from watching you. That is your legacy." Rose leaned into her husband, feeling the solid warmth of him, the safety she had found in his arms. "Our legacy," she corrected. "I could not have done any of it without you. You gave me the space to heal, the support to grow, the love to believe I deserved good things." They sat together as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant colors one last time before giving way to night. The stars began to emerge, those same bright stars that had seemed to promise possibility on Rose's first night at the ranch. "Tell me about the future," Rose said softly. "What do you see for us?" Lucas was quiet for a moment, his arm around her shoulders. "I see us growing old together, watching our grandchildren grow up. I see Sunday dinners with the whole family gathered around the table we bought when Matthew was born. I see quiet evenings on the porch, just like this. I see a life filled with love and purpose and contentment. That is all I have ever wanted, Rose. A life shared with you." "That sounds perfect," Rose whispered, and it did. No grand adventures, no dramatic redemptions, just the quiet, steady accumulation of days spent with the person she loved, doing work that mattered, surrounded by family. It was more than she had ever dared to dream, standing on that dusty street in Tucumcari 20 years ago. They rode back to the ranch as full darkness fell, navigating by moonlight and the sure feet of their horses. The lights of home glowed in the distance, warm and welcoming. As they approached, Rose could see figures moving in the windows and knew their children and grandchildren were gathering for Sunday dinner, as had become tradition. This was home, she thought with profound gratitude. Not just the building or the land, though she loved those too, but the people, the connections, the love that filled every corner. She had traveled so far from that girl in Kansas, the one who had made mistakes and paid dearly for them. She had been rejected, judged, condemned, and yet she had survived. More than survived, she had thrived, had built a life of meaning and love. The town of Tucumcari had rejected her for past mistakes, seeing only what she had done wrong. But Lucas Kincaid had looked at her and seen only her future, the person she could become given the chance. And in giving her that chance, he had given her everything. As they dismounted and walked hand in hand toward the house, toward the warmth and laughter and love waiting inside, Rose Catherine Kincaid smiled. She was home. She was loved. She was enough. And that was all anyone could ask for. The door opened and Matthew called out a greeting. Emma's laugh rang through the air, followed by the sound of a baby crying and Nathan trying to soothe it. Lucas squeezed her hand and smiled at her, that same warm smile that had captured her heart 2 decades ago. "Ready?" he asked. "Always," Rose replied, and together they walked into the light.